Welcome to Baddies for the People. I'm Rachel Pearl Jacobs.
And I'm Cheyenne Hunt.
And we're your resident bad bitches.
Let's get into it.
Welcome back, baddies. It's time for What's the Tea with me. Cheyenne, how about you start us off?
Okay, so the tea with me is going to start with an overarching PSA. Go to a real doctor, and maybe that means ask them if they like RFK when you first go to the appointment. Because I ended up going down this whole awful rabbit hole of unknowingly being treated with like pseudo medicine by this doctor, only to find out later that she is taking tips on medical treatment from RFK and Tucker Carlson. That was such a fat red flag that I wish I picked up earlier. I should have figured it out when she smelled like patchouli. Like, that's not a medical office is not a place for the smell of patchouli oil. But basically, I've been dealing with anemia. I went in there because I got an opportunity to work on the Kamala Harris campaign in the really early days of her campaign. So don't at me, no shade here. I didn't know what the campaign was going to look like. So I didn't sign on to the whole girl boss fracking moment. All right. But I had this opportunity. I really, really wanted to pursue that, but I knew I didn't feel very well. This was in June of last year. I went to get checked out, found out I was anemic. And if I was going to go to Delaware and work on this campaign, I needed to get well very fast. The first doctor I could get into was this person. And it has been months of treatment, not getting better. Went to a real doctor, got better almost immediately. So go to real doctors, do your research, ask about RFK. That's my tea.
Wait, so was it an MD?
Yeah. Yes, it was an MD. So I'm not an idiot. I didn't...
Well, I just had to check, okay? I
didn't find this woman on the street.
I don't know, the way you talked about it.
There were other red flags, too. She didn't take insurance.
That's very common.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not really a red flag.
See? That's what I mean. And, sometimes to get the best, you have to pay for it in the system, and that sucks. So I was all right.
Wait, she took no insurance at all?
None of mine for any of my treatment.
Do you have a PPO?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's my tea. Go to real doctors, get real treatment. Rachel, what's the tea with you?
The tea with me is that I just started a trial, and it's moving really slowly, and it's really testing my ability to not be overly anxious in the moment, but also wanting to get this show on the road. Okay, we had 5 FSCs. For those of you who don't know, that's a final status conference. Usually you have 1.
Because it's final.
Yeah.
Final status.
We had 5. And then to make things worse, if you are on a civil jury and there's a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is 18 pages, know someone has to grade those questionnaires at night. That someone is me.
Oh, no.
So, trial is fun, even if it's basically not started yet. So that's the tea with me.
So I think now would actually be a worthy time to tell people what kind of law you practice, because I don't know that we've ever talked about that.
I practice civil rights law, and I'm a litigator. So that means I'm going to trial. I'm actually in court. And when people think of civil rights, it could mean a lot of different things. I focus on police misconduct cases. These are the type of cases that at one time people didn't take because you couldn't win them because there's such a deference to the police.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're struggling with. The case that is going to trial right now, my client was shot in the back.
Ugh.
Now, he wasn't a perfect person, but I don't understand how we can have a conversation and people try to justify shooting someone in the back.
We have a right to innocence until proven guilty. That means the police do not get to serve as the judge, the jury, and the executioner, in theory.
You would think, but I have so many cases. The sad part is there's so much police brutality that I will never be concerned about being out of a job. And I don't just do wrongful death. There's other types of cases when people don't die, actually, and they're shot by the police or brutalized by the police. And this is crazy to say, but when the police shoot you, it's easier for them not to leave the victim alive, because that's someone who won't be able to testify against them. That's someone who won't be able to tell their side of the story. So,
yeah. And in a lot of cases too, actually, they end up having larger judgments against them if that person is alive.
Yeah.
Because you've got a lifetime of suffering and medical expenses and lost wages and things that you can actually clearly lay out that cost that person, and they can show up and testify and appear sympathetic, versus when they kill somebody and silence them.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing that has been a learning process for me with doing this kind of work. It's that the people who the police shoot, they're not saints. Sometimes they were doing bad things. They were making bad choices.
Yeah.
But bad choices don't give the police the right to shoot you.
No, they don't, unless they are so extremely bad that you are now really putting people in like a life or death.
So I literally just made this argument in our mini openings today, and it's that a police officer cannot use deadly force unless a suspect poses an imminent threat of death or great bodily injury. And if the police officer uses deadly force and the suspect does not pose an imminent threat, then that force is unreasonable. So when you think about imminent,
how can it be imminent if you're shooting somebody in the back?
That's a great question.
Like, how imminent can it be if they're literally running away from you? Sorry.
Well, it depends if you perceive that person as dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's where woke Rachel comes into the picture, because they didn't shoot Dylan Roof. They didn't think Dylan Roof with his assault rifle posed an imminent threat to their lives. Yep. Maybe that was because the officers were white and they knew he only wanted to kill black people. But it could also be that people do not find white people to be threatening in the same way they perceive Black or Hispanic people to be threatening.
Yeah.
You don't see people crossing the street and clutching their bags because they're afraid of white people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my tea. I'm in trial. I'm working a lot, but I'm really enjoying it because this is something I'm really passionate about. And these families have lost a loved one, and nothing that I can do will change that, but they should be compensated. They should be compensated for the loss of love, the loss of companionship. A lot of times, it's parents whose children have been shot by the police.
Ugh, God.
Sometimes, actually, we have one case where the police shot a grandpa. It was so bad. Yeah, so I'm glad that this is like something small that I can do to hopefully better the people's lives who have to live with the aftermath of their loved one being killed by the police.
And it's not also all about money in the sense that they can somehow be compensated with this money judgment and that makes it right. It's also about the principle of accountability. Disappointing to say the least, right?
And deadly.
And I feel for you because you're doing the work that requires the emotional labor of seeing it every day. We've talked before about you don't just get to walk into court and make the argument and go home. You are spending time with these cases for months leading up to them, watching the videos oftentimes of what happened to these people.
Yes.
Like you're having to bear witness to that and hold that emotionally. And so that's like a huge service that goes unrecognized that, I mean, I don't want to do that at all. And you do. And so you get profound credit for that.
I appreciate that. I think bearing witness to people's pain is important because those individuals deserve to be validated and seen. The scary part to me is that for as many body cams that catch these incidents, there are so many where the officer obstructs it, and there's so many where there are not body cams.
Yeah.
And I shudder to think at what behavior people do when they think no one is watching.
Based on what you've seen when they're literally...
Yes, when they know someone is watching. Insane.
Oh my God.
It's for sure cringeworthy. So tell me, Cheyenne, what made you cringe this week?
Yeah, geez. Well, other than that, and it seems obviously lesser than in gravity to what we were just talking about, one of the things that made me cringe really hard this week was watching the Supreme Court hear oral arguments in the case relating to the TikTok ban. One of the biggest things that I have seen as someone that worked on Capitol Hill on tech policy, trying to regulate these big tech companies, is that it is nearly impossible to have a full conversation about the tech, these apps, how we regulate them with lawmakers or judges, because they simply do not understand, even at a basic level, what this technology is, how it functions, the value that it offers people in society. And so as a result, they have no idea how to regulate it. And they also can't grasp the scope of the consequences of doing something like banning an app that has hundreds of millions of users, that is the basis of many people's careers.
Their livelihoods.
They also can't fathom the idea that even if this one particular app absolutely does pose a risk, which TikTok does pose a real, verifiable risk, so do all of the other ones. And by not regulating all of them and just taking the biggest competitor off of the marketplace, you're just creating fallout problems that actually further entrench the issue. And I'm cringing because I wrote bills and tried to get them passed that would have actually closed the very loopholes that Congress said they were so concerned about with the national security threats posed by the Chinese access to our data. And they weren't interested in any of that, even though they had bipartisan support. They were interested when Mark Zuckerberg spent hundreds of millions of dollars sending lobbyists to Congress, knocking on their doors, scaring them and telling them that China was going to control our country with TikTok and they needed to ban it. They didn't ask any questions. They said, "You got it, Mark." And they banned his biggest competitor. And now we're going to have a Zuckerberg monopoly on the social media space.
So it is interesting. This is, I don't know, it gives discrimination and targeting specifically because of national origin.
Yeah.
And that's like weird to say, but I almost think that the owners of this app should look at those avenues.
Oh, you're saying of all the constitutional arguments, maybe this First Amendment speech argument wasn't the right one.
Yeah.
I agree with that because I was listening to the oral arguments today and their free speech argument is pretty bad, frankly.
But the other piece that gets me is, we have like a whole separate bankruptcy system so that experts in bankruptcy are the only judges that are evaluating and looking at this information. And then there's like its own separate Supreme Bankruptcy Court.
Right.
Right. So it sounds like we really need a tech one because
we definitely do. And doesn't that also exist in like the patent space or in
patent law has its own separate lane too, but I don't know anything about that. I don't do science.
I don't know anything about it either. I'm just saying it's not like unprecedented. It's also not something we've only ever done for one thing. Like we recognize that there are certain areas that require specialization. It's the same thing. So that's my argument why we need a tech regulator in the administrative branch. They have that in Europe because when you're asking Congress, like literal old people, like I'm not a figure of speech, senior citizens.
You hate old people.
I love old people.
It's giving. Like
I hate that our Congress does not reflect the average age of an adult American citizen. I don't agree. I don't hate old people, but I hate the idea that we're asking them to regulate something that they have never once in their life used or tried to understand. And when we're doing that with how quickly technology evolves, it makes no sense to not have an agency, like a digital regulator agency, just like we have an environmental protection agency. We have these agencies that make rules on their own outside of the approval of Congress that can actually move more quickly and respond to things like disasters and changes in technology. We need that. So yeah, I think it's really cringe. And to follow up on the actual arguments that happened in the Supreme Court today, it was so apparent that they didn't understand it. And it got to the point where they even had to admit it on the record. There was an attorney that appeared in the case that was actually representing not TikTok itself, but creators who use the app and making the arguments on their behalf. And that attorney made the argument that the algorithm that is employed by TikTok is something that is so unique that there is no competitor on the marketplace that could offer the same opportunity, which anybody who's on social media knows that that's just true. Like functionally, if you've ever used the app, you know that that's true. That's why it's so popular. And the justices straight up admitted like they don't understand how algorithms work, why that could possibly be true. And then as a result, just kind of blanketly dismissed the entire argument.
That's wild. You know what that makes me think of? I asked my boss if he would do this TikTok dance with me if we won our trial. And he said, if we win a certain amount of money, and I definitely think we're going to win that amount of money. So stay tuned for my TikTok with Carl Douglas dancing to the Tupac viral song.
If TikTok still exists by the end of the trial.
Oh my God. By the end of the trial, yeah. By the end of March.
Yeah, no way. Also, I just want to be clear in case I didn't state this in the beginning, watching those oral arguments, buckle up and make like your plans because TikTok's getting banned. The justices were very clear that they were not sympathetic to any of those arguments being presented. The questions they were asking were super hostile. All of the pushback was super hostile. I'd be shocked if there's a single dissent, honestly.
Well, it sounds like I'll be putting that video on Instagram Reels instead.
And half the amount of people will see it, even if that. RIP. Preemptive RIP to TikTok unless someone pulls a total Hail Mary here. And that is what made me cringe. Oh my God, okay, with that, it's time for the vibes. I want to talk about what happened on Instagram. This week, there was outrage over an AI-generated platform on Instagram that is run by the company. So it looks like the account of a Black woman.
First of all, that's part of it, okay? Because
yeah,
in what reality do they choose a Black person to spearhead something that's going to be successful that's like never been done before?
When they want to control Black voices.
Also, but like, let's think about glass cliff theory. They put a Black woman here to, you know, ease you into the AI running your life, but also who can you blame comfortably? Black women.
Wow, that's a good point. So, yeah, the bio of this profile is actually what I think is like the most disturbing. It was like queer Black mom of 3, truth teller, warrior, like get your hot takes here. So we're stealing the identity of a queer Black mother. That's super intentional for Meta to do first, for that to be their first AI-generated company-controlled account.
Yeah, because you got to get the gays, the Blacks.
I know, digital blackface, like going crazy. It gives them a token Black person that they can control they can chime in and make her agree with all of the crazy regressive stuff that's going on because she can be the one that posts, actually, I'm Black and gay and I think that's fine. And personally, I love Donald Trump.
Yeah, Candace Owens, why couldn't you be gay? You totally let us down. Totally let us down.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Yeah, but it's absolutely scary. It's a nightmare. And then people saw it and freaked out and were like, this is dystopian. What the hell, Instagram? And so they immediately were like, oh, we weren't actually going to do that. They took it down. So as someone who spent a long time trying to regulate Facebook and get them broken up on Capitol Hill, I know their playbook. I know exactly what this is. They're trying to acclimate you to the idea that they are going to create a bunch of accounts that are AI generated, that are controlled by the company, that will mass produce and spread the propaganda of the elite.
The only difference with this iteration is that we knew about it.
Yeah.
Like, I just genuinely think these already exist and different lobbies are employing their bots and to do their dirty work.
Okay, so they definitely already exist. That's a great point. We're actually going to talk about bots.
I know. It's a perfect connection.
Yeah, but I think this was how they preempt the backlash that would come when it inevitably was leaked that the company itself was creating and controlling AI profiles versus just people utilizing the platform to spread all these bot accounts. Mark Zuckerberg wanted to be in the game of disinformation. I also don't think it's a coincidence, and sorry, I guess this is just my like going off on Zuckerberg episode, but I genuinely think this man is evil spawn. I don't think it's a coincidence, literally at all, that as soon as TikTok is getting banned and he can comfortably say, I have no competition, he went on Joe Rogan for 3 hours today and unveiled his new MAGA personality, which I think has always been there. And he knows now that he's not going to have to face consequences because he has no market competition. So he can be MAGA bro all day long. And in his mind, there's nothing anyone can do about it. I don't think that it's a coincidence that they're being this bold all at once, rolling out all of this stuff all at once, because I think they know that they're basically past the point of accountability.
Cheyenne, what happened to the free market?
Yeah. What happened to the free market?
Guess what? Existed.
It's not free in a monopoly. There is no free market if there's no competition. So those were the vibes. They're bad vibes. Sorry.
Oh my God. Splish splash fatties. It's time for the deep dive.
Stop.
I told you I was doing it.
Anyway, all right, it is time for the deep dive, and we're going to give you the breakdown of the thing that has been occupying your timeline, the news cycle. We're going to be talking about the lawsuit between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni.
Who is that man? Because I don't know.
I don't know.
Not someone relevant, not someone who could or should ever challenge the American queen that is Blake Lively. I have been a Blake Lively stan since her Serena days and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, even though that movie never made sense to me, probably because I was too young. But I just am confused because who doesn't love Blake Lively? She's so beautiful.
There's a lot of people that don't love Blake Lively, and for some objections that I think are actually valid. But
that's totally fair too. She has had some major gaffes. The whole plantation wedding thing, super cringe. But I don't think any of that justifies sexual harassment. And I think that's something that I've heard so much of. Like people talking about, oh, well, she did this, this, and this. Okay, none of that has to do with what we're actually talking about, which is something that is pervasive. And when I say pervasive, I don't just mean in the entertainment industry. I mean in every single industry. I mean everywhere in the world.
And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with the kind of cases that you litigate, which is that victims aren't perfect, almost ever, and they don't have to be entitled to the protections of the law, period. And that seems to be weaponized against women more than anyone else. So let's get that clear first. Blake Lively doesn't have to be a perfect person to be entitled to the protections under the law against sexual harassment.
Period. Again.
Again, double period.
Double period.
Make it a triple ellipses.
Okay. The way you're like ellipses is like, oh God.
So we're going to break it down for you. I think the best way to really start and make this all make sense is to do a little bit of like a timeline, like a rough, where did this come from? And then we can get into the facts and actually break down the merits of these cases for you, because I think a lot of people are just basically throwing around slander. I've heard way too many legal opinions from people who are not lawyers and have no idea what the heck is going on and what the accusations actually are, what has to be proved in court. So we're going to give you fact-based analysis of what we're looking at, what this means, and I think, Rachel, do you want to dive in and tell us really where this starts?
Sure. It Ends With Us was cast in January 2023. I don't know where I was in January 2023, but what I do know is that I didn't know who Justin Baldoni was, and I was like, oh, Blake Lively's doing another movie, and that's a mediocre-looking white man. Okay, continue.
I knew who he was only because I had seen him all over my TikTok and Instagram feeds, and his entire brand was, here's me and my man bun doing my podcast about how I'm a feminist ally and I am a warrior against toxic masculinity. That was literally all I knew about this man.
Man bun saying he's against toxic masculinity is already a red flag. I'm just saying. Everybody knows it. I'm just saying.
So,
and a podcast?
Yeah.
Like, that is a trifecta, okay? Can we just be honest? Man bun against toxic masculinity
podcast.
And has a podcast? No.
Straight to jail.
He ain't real. One of those factors is fake.
So this movie is cast in January. Everyone's very excited about it. Then what happens?
So May 2023 comes along. They start filming, and it is stopped because of the writer's strike and the Actors Guild strike that takes place. So fast forward to January 2024, right? They are finally able to begin filming again. But before they do that, they have to have this meeting on January 4th. It's an all hands meeting. And oddly enough, there's this list of demands that Blake Lively has that she wants to be implemented, in which she talks about in this all hands meeting.
And allegedly, this list of demands is signed and agreed to by Justin Baldoni and another producer who were working on the set of this movie.
Yes, not just Justin Baldoni, but it's also that the his production company, Sony, because they were the distributor of the film, everyone signed this agreement. Okay, so we're talking about binding contracts here. But let's talk about the terms of this contract.
The terms here are really what this whole case is about.
So the first demand is that they don't show nude videos or images of women, including the producer's wife, to Blake Lively or her employees.
No more mention of Mr. Baldoni's or Mr. Heath's previous pornography addiction or Blake Lively's lack of pornography consumption.
No more discussions to Blake Lively or her employees about personal experiences with sex, including as it relates to spouses or others.
No more mention to Blake Lively or her employees of personal times that physical consent was not given in sexual acts as either the abuser or the abused.
No more descriptions of their own genitalia to Blake Lively.
No more jokes or disparaging comments to be made to Blake Lively or her employees about her HR complaints that they have received on set or about missing the HR meeting.
So I think this line is particularly important because first it addresses retaliation, which is, them retaliating against her because of her complaints. But the other piece is that when you receive a complaint, you're put on notice, okay? So when we're talking about legal action, there's a difference between something bad happening and knowing about something bad happening and allowing it to continue to happen.
Yes, especially within the realm of employment law.
The next one is really disturbing to me as a woman who has always dealt with weight insecurities, and it is no more inquiries by Mr. Baldoni to Blake Lively's trainer without her knowledge or consent to disclose her weight.
Jesus.
Blake Lively was postpartum, recently postpartum, breastfeeding her child at this time, and she just had a baby.
Yeah.
And you're asking about, I'm just...
Yeah.
This list goes for so long.
Yeah, we can't possibly read it all to you. So these next two kind of go together, and I thought these were kind of the most unhinged. No more mention by Mr. Baldoni of him speaking to Blake Lively's dead father, and also no more pressing by Mr. Baldoni for Blake Lively to disclose her religious beliefs or unsolicited sharing of his. That just reeks of the most disgusting, blatant manipulation. I'm talking to your dead dad. That's such a power grab in the most unfathomably slimy way. I can't.
There's another one that I think is just really, there's a couple that I'm aghast. One of them has to do with exposing her to COVID and her infant child to COVID. And I want to know if I'm exposed to COVID. I'm a young, fit woman.
Yeah.
Babies have no immune system.
Yeah.
And to knowingly expose someone and their child to COVID is quite, I think that's a crime in itself.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. One of the other ones that is in here, I don't know where it is, but that really stood out to me is there's a lot of instances where it's referenced that Baldoni would improvise kissing, intimacy scenes, sex scenes that were not agreed to previously in Blake Lively's contract, that he would insist that they needed to take place on an open set. One of the most egregious here was that there was a birth scene in this film where he surprisingly cast his own best friend as the doctor who was basically up in Blake Lively's crotch.
And they only gave her a little piece of cloth to cover it.
Like little tiny piece of modesty cloth to cover it, which... And it was wide open set, with her legs wide open in the stirrups, in the medical stirrups, in front of everybody.
These are just a couple of the items that she demanded agreement upon to continue to film. As disgusting as that list was, that's not even the most disturbing part of this story for me.
Yeah, agreed.
In summer of 2024, Justin Baldoni, who I call Jockstrap, decided that if he was going down, Blake Lively was going down with him. He embarked on a social media smear campaign against Blake Lively because she reported the sexual harassment, and I would argue sexual abuse. If someone is touching you and you don't want to be touched,
yeah, it's abuse.
And it's kissing, and
yeah.
I mean, but
I think this happened, by the way, not even because Blake Lively decided that she wanted to go public with it, because that's not what happened. There were leaks from other people on set about there being tension and there being a hostile work environment. At this point, Baldoni sees the writing on the wall. His reputation is going to be tried by the jury of his peers here. And so
wait, but I don't understand, because nothing about these allegations is public at this point.
Yeah, but I think he senses that there's blood in the water, in the knowing now that there's rumblings publicly that there's tension on set.
Oh my God, when you're a shit human being,
you cause tension? That's crazy.
In a jockstrap, people are going to know when things get stinky. I just cannot. Like,
I cannot with you. You kill me.
The idea that she didn't want to bring the things that happened to her to the public sphere. Like, she didn't go to the media with these complaints.
No.
And that's the part that is so... It's not fair, because not only are you harassed and violated, but then someone else forces you to relive that harassment and violation on a public scale, because you have to acknowledge it and talk about it and be on the front of magazines because your abuser was so fragile that he lost his damn mind.
Yeah. So let's talk about how he lost his mind. He lost his mind around this period where people started grumbling about there being tension on set. So he immediately hired a crisis PR firm. Note, this is the same crisis PR manager that's been hired by a lot of other famous people when they've come under scrutiny, including Johnny Depp during his trial with Amber Heard. He employs this woman, and they embark on a campaign of what is known in the industry as astroturfing. So generally, crisis PR, these are professionals that you hire when your brand, either as a person or a company, is undergoing some kind of crisis. Sometimes it's you're being accused of being a sexual abuser. Other times, a lot of times, these are legitimate professionals who are trying to help companies navigate things like changes in market value, that are trying to help people figure out how to remain relevant when there's some kind of story going on that's really threatening that. But in general, astroturfing is something that is revered as not kosher. It's not okay. And yet this woman who Baldoni hired, it becomes clear by all these text messages that Lively is able to submit in this complaint, embarks on this astroturfing campaign.
Yes, because astroturfing is her shit. And I had never heard of any of these like pseudo publicist terminology. So I called my friend who's the founder of Gazelle Media Group, and she explained it to me like normal publicists are like Samantha from Sex and the City, and crisis publicists are like Olivia Pope.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, you call these people when you're like, I have a problem and I need you to solve it.
Yes. And apparently the problems include problems you made for yourself and how you're now going to slander your victims.
Oh, that's like super common. So like, I can guarantee you Harvey Weinstein went through a whole bunch of crisis PR people. Like, this is not uncommon at all as a strategy.
But did Harvey Weinstein, I don't even maybe he had an astroturfing campaign, but I just don't remember.
Oh, he totally did. Against like his first victims, they got absolutely bloodied and buried, and a lot of them lost their careers over it.
Oh, Rose McGowan.
Yep.
Yes. I spoke too soon.
Yep. And so this whole thing, I think, is an important thing to talk about because it really makes you rethink things. But we should probably say what astroturfing is, which is essentially a process where this crisis PR manager uses their connections and power to plant a bunch of fake stories about the target all across the media. So print media, traditional media, and by utilizing bots and influencers to spread social media campaigns. A lot of it is mis and disinformation. And it sounds like we're pretty confident in what we're saying about what happened here. The reason why we can say that with our chest in this case is because Blake Lively came with the receipts. She had all of these text messages between the crisis PR manager in Baldoni and also his general PR manager that he usually uses as publicist, where they are literally saying he doesn't understand how lucky he is that we're able to cover this up. Because between everything that he did, with how creepy he was, that he was whispering in people's ears on set and touching people, he doesn't understand how lucky he is that we've been able to cover this up for him.
Yeah. The important piece of this also is that there is a billionaire who co-founded Wayfarer, which is the name of the production company, and he pledged to ruin Blake Lively and her family.
He pledged, it was like $150 million to Baldoni's press campaign.
So he was the sugar daddy to Jockstrap. Disgusting.
It's going to get me every time. If you need a sugar daddy to fund your own abuse cover up, you really need to get yourself in check and understand how powerful you are or not. Or not.
Ugh. Okay, so there's one piece of this when I was reading through the text messages that just enraged this little pit of my stomach.
Tell me.
As you viewers have probably figured out, I have ADHD.
What?
And I'm neurodivergent.
No way.
And Jockstrap tries to say, actually, let me just read you this text message.
Yeah, I feel like you have to read it. This is in a text to the crisis PR management people.
Hey guys, one thing I think I want to do is the Dr. Amen show. Matt, I know you have your feelings about it, but his practice saved my friend Miranda's life a few months ago. With everything going on, I want to have an offensive move showing my neurodivergence and some of the attributes that come with it so that I can start talking about it. Most anything that I have been accused of is social awkwardness and impulsive speech. And I think me sitting down with him and just looking at my brain and talking about some of these things will be helpful for me. Bitch. Oh.
Way to take the whole community down with you in an attempt to perpetuate so much stigma where it's fine that I'm a literal sexual abuser because I
have neurodivergence. What? You know who else did this though?
Who?
Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, he does that all the time.
Yeah. Can we not use neurodivergence to try to justify unacceptable behavior? I'm aware of the ways that my neurodivergence makes me different, and I can understand and acknowledge that, but having random outbursts, which I do throughout this episode, does not mean I'm like, hey, Cheyenne, want to talk about my naked wife?
Yeah.
I'm single, don't forget, looking for a husband.
Oligarchs, apply.
Click the link below.
Oh my God. Oh my God, yeah, that was particularly egregious. I'm also hoping that never happened because I actually really like Dr. Amen, so I hope that you didn't do that and film that, and I'm just hoping that he saw through that and never got involved.
We could do a whole episode on the difference between amen and amen and whether it's pronounced amen or amen.
Well, I don't have enough religious trauma to be in whatever this conversation is.
Shout out to the Southern Baptists. Anyway.
Yeah, so this is where it takes another turn, because he didn't just stop at astroturfing. He took it up another level, which is the film comes out and it's time to market it. And there's a marketing agreement that all of the actors in this film are allegedly bound to, where they have to promote the film in accordance with what this agreement says. And it's what the studio has said.
Florals.
Yeah.
Gentle, soft smiles. They
tell Blake Lively, I know it's a heavy movie about domestic violence, but we don't want to like really bum people out. We want them to come see it. So you need to talk about, you know, the character and how she's positive and smiley and has girlfriends and wears florals. And you need to be really like uppity when you talk about it. And so that came across as her appearing totally like out of depth with what this movie, tone deaf to the extreme. Like she didn't get what this movie was about. And she got completely skewered for it online.
I kind of like, without knowing what was going on, I was cringing so hard.
Yeah, a lot of people were.
At like how this came across. And he really was like, I'm standing up for these victims of domestic violence. And I should have noticed the stark contrast in the way that the rest of the cast was marketing the movie and the way that Jockstrap was marketing the movie. But maybe that's just 2020 hindsight.
It is, and it's also the way that we're programmed. Like we see women and their flaws and immediately think that it's on them and their responsibility, and don't look deeper into what else might be going on. But this was also particularly sinister.
Yes, so as the dragging continued, Blake Lively's people started to get suspicious, as any good publicist would.
Right.
And because the crisis PR people were messy bitches, you're a messy bitch if you leave the receipts that they left. Like, you couldn't use Signal or WhatsApp?
Yeah, that's so true.
Fuck!
They're just texting each other like, yeah, I got that article placed. Nice job. Like, I got that run. We're going to bury her. There was one that was so damning. That was, it said, we can bury anyone.
I think the one that was damning for me was he doesn't even realize how bad it is. And then they go into some of the ways that he had sexually harassed people.
And he should be so grateful. Yeah, that's so crazy.
Shit hit the fan for Jockstrap when Blake Lively and her legal team filed a California civil rights complaint.
Yeah, so this is also something I want to talk about, because there's been a lot of misunderstanding online with what this filing was. First of all, it was immediately covered as Blake Lively files a lawsuit. Yeah, first of all, incorrect. That's not what she filed. Rachel, tell us why that's wrong.
So, in order to be able to sue with certain California causes of actions, which is the state of California has its own laws. They have particularly strict laws when it comes to employees and sexual harassment. They are more expansive than anywhere else in the country.
And also than a lot of the federal protections.
Correct. So Blake Lively had to file with the California Civil Rights Department, which
is not a court.
Yeah, it's not a court, but also this would coincide with the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which is a California law, and it would automatically concurrently file a EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a federal complaint. And these agencies, it's an administrative process to be able to get the right to sue.
Right. So they have to get a letter from these agencies first, giving them the right to sue and file a lawsuit before they can just go to the court and file these claims.
Correct, because you have to exhaust your administrative remedies. Now, let me be completely honest with you. If you want to get anything other than the satisfaction of knowing that your employer was sued for violating your rights, you should not rely on these agencies alone.
Yeah.
Get a personal attorney. Get an employment attorney. I was so confused about this because she filed a California civil rights complaint, but then she filed her lawsuit in the Southern District of New York, which is federal court in a different state. And I was like, what? Why would you do that?
Yeah, we were on the phone really brainstorming why this would happen. Rachel had to call her employment law friend.
Right. So shout out to the Westmoreland law firm. I called Dominique Westmoreland, who specializes in these types of employment disputes. And he explained to me that, first of all, the Southern District of New York is what we know as like a rocket docket. So you have the opportunity to have your case heard faster than you would in California court. This would be civil court. Some of my cases have taken 4 years to be resolved.
Right.
Southern District of New York, within 16 months, you're done. The other benefit of filing in federal court is that you get to use federal and state laws. And because Blake Lively is a resident of New York, and none of the defendants, who are the people she's suing, are residents of New York, they have what's called diversity. And in order to bring a federal lawsuit, you have to either have a federal question, which is where
it's an issue of federal law.
Yes. Or you have to have diversity of the parties and a controversy over
75,000.
Correct. Clearly,
someone just recently took the bar.
Civil procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she has both. So she gets to have her case in federal court in the state of New York, and she gets to bring all of those super expansive California state laws as well as the federal laws.
This feels like a good time to interject another jab at people online who have been trying to discredit Blake Lively because they're saying she's made so many different filings, she can't make up her mind. It's because she's trying to piece together some kind of case that makes sense because this is all fabricated and no one wants to hear it, da-da-da-da. No, this is a very well concentrated legal effort that has been thought out and methodically applied and is in compliance with the law. So
Correct.
Please don't talk about things that you don't understand when it comes to federal law.
There's another piece. Blake Lively's attorneys are a big deal. So she has attorneys from Minot, which is like a gigantic firm, and Wilkie Barr, I think I can't remember if that's the other law firm, but it's two big law firms. There's like big law, and then there's mid-sized firms, then there's boutique firms, there's small firms, but big law is big money, okay?
Yeah.
And she invested in this lawsuit because her attorneys are expensive as hell.
Well, she's got $150 million hole, essentially, to dig herself out of that Baldoni set for her. So I don't blame her.
Yikes. Well, let's talk about these claims against Justin Baldoni and his associates.
Yeah, because the specific legal claims she's making are also widely misunderstood on social media. I cannot conceal my ire for people who throw around legal terms and half-baked legal terms like discovery mode. That doesn't exist. There's no, what is that? That's nothing. Stop it. So let's talk about the actual claims in this case.
So Blake Lively brought a litany of different claims for sexual harassment. Some of them were in violation of Title VII. Some of them were in violation of California law. But there's a basic requirement that she has to meet if she wants to be successful in these claims.
Yeah, so let's talk about exactly what she has to prove. And then we can weigh the evidence that we just talked about against these claims.
The first element is that she has to be a member of a protected class.
Check, because she's a woman.
Right. And just for people who don't know, protected classes are like race, gender, sexual orientation, national origin. It's any way that someone can discriminate against you and that there's legal protections
for.
Yeah. Yes. The next element is that the sexual harassment has to be unwanted. This tells me that clearly men wrote this law.
I know. Oh my God. Just the verbiage. Who wants sexual harassment? That's an oxymoron.
It's just,
Clearly we've met that, given that there was a whole production meeting that said, please stop harassing me.
The next element is that the harassment has to be based on your sex. So I take this to mean that you have to be being harassed because you're a woman.
Yeah.
So if someone's like, hey, nice rack, that's sexual harassment, unless you want them to compliment your boobs.
And you've invited it.
Yes. And wearing a low-cut shirt is not inviting it.
Period.
So the last element is that the sexual conduct has to be sufficiently pervasive, enough to create a hostile work environment and impact the conditions of their employment. So Blake Lively has a whole list of examples of ways that the sexual harassment was so pervasive that it impacted the conditions of her employment.
We also obviously, like, judging by the people that have come out in support of her, the fact that these agreements reference not only her but her employees, have a whole laundry list of witnesses that will say with their whole chest that this was in fact like totally infecting the work culture.
Right. So an example of this would be the producers repeatedly going into Blake Lively's trailer while she was breastfeeding or in a state of undress. Yeah. That's completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
So that would be
something that would impact the entire work environment, and that was pervasive because it happened multiple times, and it was not just Baldoni, but his other associates as well.
Right. So the last element is that the company has to either have been aware or should have been aware of the harassment that was taking place. And this is interesting because Justin Baldoni tried to be a Renaissance man in being the co-lead, the director, and the producer, who was also part owner in Wayfarer. So because Jockstrap was the sexual harasser, while also effectively being the employer, he fucked himself. The next element is retaliation. And this one's can be kind of confusing because you're like, wait, what is retaliation? It's actually when you complain about something bad that's happening to you and they are even worse to you because you have the audacity to complain.
Yeah.
First, you have to have engaged in some type of protected activity. So that means raising a concern like, hey, my boss is sexually harassing me.
Yeah, or like asking for an all-hands production meeting to say, I would like all of these requests honored if we're going to continue to make this movie together.
Yeah.
Obviously, Baldoni didn't take that very well because he hired the AstroTurf woman to bury Blake Lively after that. So that, I think, will very clearly classify as retaliation.
The last cause of action, I think, is the most important. And you're like, why? This is actually also a sexual harassment cause of action. And it generally has the same elements as the sexual harassment cause of action that we spoke about before. But this cause of action entitles Blake Lively to punitive damages.
So punitive damages, for those that don't know at home, are a type of damage that you can get from a court when the behavior of the accused is particularly egregious. They're not designed to compensate you directly for money that you've lost or harm that you've suffered. They are meant to be punishment. So the number that you can be awarded can be quite large, technically up to 10 times the amount of the actual monetary damage that you suffered as a result of the action.
Right. So, billionaire, bye-bye.
Yeah, and you can obviously make out a case that Blake Lively lost a lot of money here because we're talking about an incredibly powerful figure in Hollywood whose market value was deeply harmed by this astroturfing campaign. And lawyers will do their creative magic of trying to quantify just how much damage was done in lost business, lost appearances. She's got...
there's experts for that.
Yeah, there's experts for that because we're not just talking about films and that kind of salary. This woman has products. She has brands. She has things
businesses.
That she's... Yeah, and all of that will have been affected by this damage to her reputation. So you take all of that and then you multiply that by potentially up to 10
times.
And that's how much she could earn in punitive damages in this case. So that's really significant.
Right. So to be eligible for punitive damages, you have to be able to show that the conduct was done with malice, oppression, or fraud. Now, Malice means that you knowingly had evil intent.
Yeah. Yeah. Malice aforethought or the cold heart.
Yes. So let's talk about those receipts again. Because
we can bury anyone.
These folks literally map out the malice that is needed for her to be entitled to punitive damages against not just Jockstrap, but his businesses, his business partners.
Yeah.
And remember that billionaire that we talked about that pledged funding? Him too.
I also think you can make the argument, even without those super damning text messages, that the astroturfing campaign in and of itself almost requires malice. It's really difficult to justify any explanation for trying to ruin someone's reputation with planted stories, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on social media bots to spread this mis and disinformation about someone, and for that to not inherently be malicious.
So there's some other causes of action that I think are worth noting. There's an intentional infliction of emotional distress claim, and that's when someone acts so outrageously that it causes you emotional harm.
And they knew it. They knew it was going to, or could have.
No person in their right mind would think that what they did wasn't outrageous.
Yeah.
The other cause of action, which at first I was like, why doesn't Blake Lively have a defamation claim? I was pretty shocked because it's clear that there was malice. It's clear that there was bad intentions in what they did. And instead of bringing a defamation claim, what the attorneys did was they brought a false light invasion of privacy claim, which is where you have to show that someone intended to do something harmful or portray you in a false light. And that's literally what their game plan was in these text messages. And this is not an easy law to break. Okay, y'all? We don't take defamation claims, especially not for the celebrities, because the burden is so high.
It's really, really high. It's very difficult to sue as a public figure for someone coming for your reputation.
Yeah, because you have to show that they knew what they were saying was untrue.
And that they said it with intent to hurt you, which is a very difficult thing to prove unless you literally have the text messages where they say, hey, this isn't true, and we're going to hurt her.
And we're going to do it on purpose so that people think bad things about her.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So those are the claims. I think it's worth noting that at this time, Baldoni has not filed a counterclaim. Looking at you, people on TikTok who think you know what you're talking about, he has not filed a counterclaim in this lawsuit. Instead, he has filed a claim against the New York Times because they printed in total all of Blake Lively's complaint to the California Civil Rights Department.
And he says that it mischaracterizes his actions because they didn't put random
emojis that were in the text messages, because Lively's team didn't put emojis that were in the text messages that were there. I looked at obviously, you never know. I looked.
We read it.
These did not change the context or the content of what we're talking about whatsoever.
Poor Jockstrap. He just spent his whole life trying to write this script, and Blake Lively and her mean husband, they took it away from him and made all these decisions, and he just, like, bruh, nobody gives a fuck about your script.
He didn't even write the script. It's a book.
I know.
It's Colleen Hoover's book.
He did write the screenplay, but
yeah.
Added in minor sex scenes. Hello?
Yeah, like, what are we doing?
Just a hello? Are we okay?
Wait, when you say minor, do you mean like...
No, I mean like minors.
What?
Yeah, that was a whole element of the controversy because he put in a non-existent sex scene between the people who were portraying the minors, like the younger versions of Baldoni and Blake Lively. Well, no, it wasn't Baldoni. It was the person that she lost her virginity to.
He put that in and it's not even in the book?
Yes.
Also, I think it's really telling. Baldoni had his lawyer put out a statement that they will at some point sue Blake Lively. What does that mean? That's nothing. Put your money where your mouth is. Put your name on a complaint and put it in the court of law, or shut up.
The funniest part about all of this hoopla to me is that Jockstrap's lawsuit will fail because there's these things called anti-slap laws in California,
right,
which are intended to fight for people's right to freedom of speech.
And particularly, they're often applied to the freedom of the press.
Exactly.
We don't like the idea that people who are litigious, people like Donald Trump, that have a history of suing the press for publishing things that they don't like, can chill speech and tie these press outlets up in lengthy, costly litigation so that would prevent them from publishing true, newsworthy stories. So that really ties up the legal part of this case to date. I'm sure there will be more filings and we'll talk about it again. But I also think we have to talk about the larger cultural aspect of what's going on here. What blows my mind is we're talking about Blake Lively, one of the most powerful, successful, accomplished,
blonde hair, blue-eyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Powerful women in Hollywood, married to one of the most well-known, powerful men in Hollywood.
America's heartthrob.
Truly, like America's sweetheart couple. And it can happen to her. And they can bury her. And someone like Justin Baldoni, like who no one knew his name 3 months ago. Like no one who had any idea who this man was. And he can bury her because he was about to be exposed as an abuser. And that is how quickly we will throw women under the bus for a man who says pretty please. And I also think it's super telling that the main players here that helped him orchestrate this strategy were women.
Yeah, because society hates women,
and women are part of society, which means a lot of women hate women.
That's true. I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out, though, that this has happened and this continues to happen specifically to Black women in the industry.
Yeah.
And they do not have anyone stick up for them.
Yeah.
And that's horrible. Like, we can see the ways that Blake Lively's privilege benefited her in this instance, and it's still egregious and horrible.
Yeah.
And it's not something I would wish on anyone.
Yeah.
But it tells you then how vulnerable the most marginalized are.
Yeah.
Because if someone who we view as having a position of power can have to endure this.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, you can't even imagine. That's like you said earlier. It's like you can't imagine what these people do when no one's looking. If they're willing to do this in a room where everyone's watching.
If they're willing to talk out loud in those and digitally record, because when you're texting, it's like a digital record of what did they just say out loud or over the phone? That's my question. Because I think shit's worse than we even know.
What were they concealing if this is what they were willing to be open about?
For real, because they said, oh, well, we can't put some stuff on paper. They specifically said that in the text messages. Yeah. So what couldn't we put on paper that we did? That you planned to do?
We did. That's absolutely crazy. And I also think we're going back to this conversation about victims don't have to be perfect, because I don't like that a lot of the online discourse is, well, Blake Lively was mean to an interviewer one time and she had a plantation wedding, so who cares?
Yeah, the interviewer who pointed out her stomach when she was pregnant, like, bro, fuck you.
What year is it?
No one is going to point out what a man is wearing or how fat he looks.
Yeah, it's just not happening.
And to say that she was so mean, bitch, please.
Yeah. And also, like, super not okay to have a plantation wedding, but one, they apologized, and two, it doesn't matter in the context of a conversation about sexual assault.
Yeah, and I mean, the plantation wedding thing still blows me, high key. Don't think apologizing is enough.
Yep.
But even with that, horrible people can still be victims of horrible acts.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think that judging by the people who orchestrated this attack I mentioned earlier, these are the same people that were hired by Johnny Depp when he was in his litigation with Amber Heard. And Amber Heard was not a perfect victim. And there are a lot of women out there. In fact, all victims are not perfect victims because nobody is perfect. And I really do think that we should take another look at the way that we so quickly believe that women are asking for it or brought it on themselves, and how much of that is shaped by absolute garbage that we're fed online, that we don't fact check, that we don't source. I mean, everything that we came to believe about Blake Lively so quickly, that so many of us just ate up, was a disinformation campaign by a private citizen. How much of that is happening that we don't know about? And now we've got Meta out here with their AI bots that are going to be feeding whatever narrative they want to feed. I think the moral is be so, so careful at what you take to be truth, especially when it's directed at women.
Fact checking is important.
Yeah.
We are about to enter into a new era of fake news on steroids.
Yeah.
And I think this situation should be a flashing red light, okay?
Yeah.
Everyone needs to stop, look around, make sure no cars are coming before they proceed into the intersection.
Yeah. Wake up and really, really realize that so much of what we're being fed is being manufactured for someone's benefit.
But not this baddie's content. This is all natural.
It is coming to you straight from the source. That was a deep dive. And before we head out, we have to do rent free. Rachel, what's been living in your head rent free this week?
My rent free is that Los Angeles is on fire, and not in the good way.
Yeah. For reference, that's where she lives, and that's where we're here in Southern California right now.
Yes. Cheyenne was kind enough to offer me refuge if I needed to evacuate. I'm really blessed I didn't. The air quality is terrible.
So bad.
But I don't feel like extending my thoughts and prayers is sufficient when I'm talking about people who have lost everything but their lives.
And there are people who have lost their lives.
Yeah, in these fires.
I think at least 11 the last time I saw a count. Yeah.
And it's horrible. And it happened so fast. I know people who have had to evacuate. It's terrifying to think that you have to just grab and determine what the most important things are that you can't live without. And that's like, someone said the 4 Ps. It's like prepared food or whatever, your passport and papers. And there was 2 other Ps that I don't remember, which clearly tells you that I'm not prepared.
Yeah, I'm not prepared.
Shit hits the fan for me.
Yeah.
I would have to check that post.
The 4th P is post. Check the post.
Yeah, check the post. Post on Instagram so that we know.
Yeah.
But that's the other weird part about what I saw. The people who were pillaging the people who evacuated stuff and the people who had their property burned.
Yeah.
Like, bro.
I also saw that there were like influencers taking pictures like in front of stuff on fire and like in front of the blaze skyline. Like, holy tone deaf. Like, what are we talking about? I can't even imagine seeing that and thinking that that's a good idea.
I also want to highlight for the internet that it wasn't all celebrities who lost their homes. Altadena has historically been a working class Black area when Pasadena was a sundown town with restrictive covenants that didn't allow non-white people to live there.
Yep.
And that area was devastated.
Yeah, the narrative that the only people whose homes are burning down are like Paris Hilton is incorrect. And it's an excuse to allow people to not stare in the face the weight of the tragedy and the reality that we are living the consequences of an unaddressed climate crisis right now.
And Los Angeles is on fire. So extend your condolences, your thoughts and prayers. I don't know, donate some money if you can. But most importantly, reevaluate everything. What is important to you? Do you want your children and your grandchildren to be forced to be breathing this polluted, smoke-filled, dust-filled air
Yeah.
for the rest of their lives because
you want to pay less taxes.
Oh my God.
Garbage.
I hope we brought enough joy to make this not a super heavy episode, but honestly, there's nothing good about sexual harassment or fires, but this is the real shit that's going on.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about it because if we don't, who's going to witness their pain?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for you this week, baddies.